The night my husband said I love you at our anniversary dinner, a second phone lit up in his jacket, not his usual one, a phone I never knew he carried. I am Ren, a 29-year-old art teacher from Portland, and I watched his face change while the candle between us burned for our table, the same one every year. My husband, Silas, reached over out of habit and refilled my water glass without asking, the way he does every year, and I almost forgot to be angry for a second. He didn't touch the second phone. I did, sliding it half an inch, just enough to see the screen light up gray, no contact name, an unfamiliar area code, and something in my stomach dropped in a way I couldn't explain. I smiled instead of asking. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd been smiling through questions for almost a year already. He ordered the same mushroom risotto he's ordered every anniversary since our first date, even though I know for a fact he doesn't even like it anymore. My closest friend Jade was the only person who knew how strange this last year had gotten. Locked phone, face down on the counter every time. Calls taken in the garage, door pulled shut. I told myself it was work stress, then something worse, and didn't say it out loud because saying it would have made it real. "You'd tell me if something felt wrong," Jade said once over coffee, watching me too closely. "I don't know what I'd be telling you," I said, which wasn't a no. The mail had started arriving addressed only to Silas, and I later learned his mother, Diane, had quietly switched our mailing preference with the county, easier for the paperwork. I noticed the tax notice before he ever saw it. It's the same instinct I use in my classroom, watching which kid goes quiet before a fight breaks out. Silas wasn't cheating in the way I feared, but I didn't know that yet, sitting across from Jade, turning my coffee cup in slow circles, already building a case I hadn't told anyone about. His mother, Diane, had been part of our life since before the wedding, and she'd handed us the down payment for our house, $62,400, calling it a gift, not a loan, years ago. I found the folder completely by accident, looking for our marriage certificate in a filing cabinet Silas rarely touched. Inside was a quitclaim deed, notarized, dated March 9th, quietly moving a share of our house back into her name, with a signature that was supposed to be his. I know his handwriting. I've watched him sign hundreds of school permission slips over my shoulder. This wasn't it. The letters leaned wrong, too careful, like someone copying. I photographed every page with my phone, hands shaking, then sat on the floor running the date against our calendar. March 9th was a Tuesday. Silas had a dentist appointment that same afternoon. I'd driven him myself 40 minutes across town, nowhere near the notary's office listed on the raised gold stamp. I didn't confront him that night. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it and said nothing. The dinner table jab kept coming back to me all week, sharper each time I turned it over. "I just think it's smarter if the house stays easy to manage," Diane had said, smiling, holding her wine glass at our anniversary table. "You two are still figuring things out." She'd laughed, and the waiter had laughed too, unsure what he was agreeing to, and Silas had gone quiet in that way of his, the way that used to mean nothing and now meant everything. I didn't know yet that her house had slid into foreclosure that spring, or that she needed equity fast and thought ours was easiest to quietly borrow against. "We just want what's best for everyone," she told me once when I asked why the tax notice came addressed only to Silas. I'd let it go then, tired of making things awkward, but sitting with that folder still fresh in my mind, I understood the jab differently now. It wasn't a joke about our marriage. It was a small, careless confirmation of something she believed she already owned. I started a spreadsheet that night, the kind no one else could see over my shoulder, hidden in a folder labeled Lesson Plans on my school laptop, bank transfer dates, the March 9th notary stamp. Photos of the quitclaim deed itself, dated and time-stamped clearly. 14 months of small things I hadn't let myself name until they had a place to live. I didn't tell Jade, I didn't tell Silas. My hands went cold every time I opened the file, even at my own kitchen table with the lights on. Some nights I typed one line and closed the laptop, unable to look at what I was building. I told myself I was gathering proof before I said anything out loud, the same way I used to grade papers twice before handing them back. But underneath that quieter was something else. If I had proof, I wouldn't need him to explain. I wouldn't have to sit across the table from my own husband and ask him the one question I was most afraid would change everything between us for good. The second phone rang a third time before Silas finally reached for it, right there at the anniversary table, his face going pale in the candlelight. "This is Silas Calloway," he said, standing, walking a few steps away, hand against his ear against the noise. I caught fragments, closing, tomorrow morning. We never signed off on that. I sat frozen, my napkin folded into a tight triangle, the way it always ends up when I'm nervous. When he came back, he didn't sit. He crouched beside my chair instead, voice low, and set the second phone on the table between us like a confession. That was the title company. Someone scheduled a closing on our house for tomorrow. My lawyer said stay quiet until I had proof. I should have told you anyway, months ago. My first thought wasn't relief. It was 3 missed calls I'd assumed were spam, unanswered in my own phone for over a week. I looked at him. Is there someone else? I asked. He shook his head slowly. It's my mother, he said very quietly. 9 months ago, Silas said, still crouched by my chair, I found a quitclaim deed with my signature on it. I never signed it. He said Diane had asked him for old paperwork after the wedding, then quietly used it to move a house share into her name. His lawyer had warned that if Diane found out too soon, she could shred records or claim he'd known all along and helped her. So he'd gotten this second phone, a number Diane never had, just for calls to the lawyer and the county recorder on his lunch breaks. I should have told you the day I found it, he said, voice breaking slightly. Instead, I let a lawyer's caution turn into a year of you thinking I was hiding something worse. I didn't say anything for a moment. I reached into my bag and pulled out my own folder, the photographs, the spreadsheet, 14 months of quiet work laid beside his. You've been doing this too, he said, staring at it, and for the first time all night, he almost laughed. We called the title company's records office the next morning, both of us on speakerphone at our kitchen table, coffee going cold between us. A records officer, Priya Nandan, pulled the file while we waited, voice steady, unbothered by the panic in ours. The notarization on this deed doesn't match our vendor's stamp registry for that date, she said. Whoever notarized this wasn't licensed in this county on March 9th. That stamp was reported lost 11 months ago. I can freeze tomorrow's closing today, she said, but a fraud case like this usually takes the county recorder and a title investigator weeks, sometimes months, to fully unwind. She wasn't on our side or Diane's, just reading a record. Silas closed his eyes. I slid my own folder across the table, listing bank transfer dates, $62,400, the notary's address 40 minutes from where Silas actually was. After we hung up, Silas sat very still. She's going to fight this, he said quietly, not about Priya, about his mother, and I realized he already knew her better than I'd let myself imagine. We went to Diane's house that Sunday, the same table where she'd handed us the down payment 4 years ago with a warm smile. Silas set the folder down first, then Priya's written confirmation, printed and dated. His mother's signature, not hers. Diane didn't flinch right away. You have no idea what it costs to hold this family together, she said, sliding the papers back across the table, and you sign things you don't even remember, Silas. He didn't answer, and for a second I watched her almost win the room the way she always had. Then I set my own folder beside his, the bank dates, the photograph deed, the notary stamp reported lost 11 months before she used it. Her expression rearranged itself like she was picking which version of surprise to wear. I was trying to, she started and didn't finish, that was the crack. You forged his signature, I said, on our house. She set her coffee cup down slowly, and for the first time in 4 years, she didn't have a quick, warm answer ready. The closing never happened, but the fraud case wasn't over. Priya's flag held, and 3 weeks later we refinanced properly under both names, though the fraud complaint against Diane stayed open with the county for months, and we paid our own lawyer out of savings meant for something else. Diane didn't come to Thanksgiving. His Aunt Carol quietly took her side, a distance that hasn't closed. I still feel the cost of what I said, sitting here now at peace with having said it. 6 months later, signing the final paperwork, I reached over and refilled his glass first, then my own, a habit I didn't notice I'd picked up until after. I used to think staying quiet made me strong. I've learned that naming something out loud calmly is the harder, better strength. If you've ever smiled through something you already knew, like this video, subscribe and leave a comment. Has someone in your family ever made you feel like a guest in your own life? His mother's signature started it. Mine, on the deed beside his, ended it.